moment we're on the hold, so there's no voice being transmitted. Then the camera and mic is that one there. That's the instruction, and then the screen and thumbnail is that one there. So you need to click on each one of those to go through. But it's live now, so I wouldn't do it just now.
So why do I have to?
You have to switch between the scenes. So this is like you're the video director here.
Yeah.
So you're switching between what's being output.
But
So
why
at the
would
moment,
that?
it's just this holding page that's being output. No voice, just that holding page. And at 6 o'clock, click on camera and mic, do your introductions, and then when you're ready to go to the PowerPoint, just click on screen and thumb,
Okay.
and then click on that so you can use your forwards and backwards.
Okay, so that has me as just straight on. Okay, but it is mainly on. Were you mainly switching between?
So it's just like a couple of minutes introduction and then straight in.
Okay.
To the thing. This is the output here, so you'll see what's being output at any one time.
So to go live, if I click cam and mic, and then I am on. Can you ping out a couple of times, just saying people ask questions to you? But that's the one of just when I'm going through about the transfer, you set the value of the clients, just say, okay, how will we do that? How will you ask the question?
How do you want me to do
Yeah.
it? I'll come and sit here.
Okay. At that point, we go back onto cam and mic then.
You'll probably have a slide that goes with it, won't you?
Yeah, but we're on the leverage, but then someone says, okay, I've got a question coming in, so we go back into the studio just to give it a...
Okay.
So...
Now, just click on hold.
everybody. Good evening. Welcome to the first Pro Plus Live, as we're calling these webinars for 2020. So the festive season is behind us. An amazing quarter is behind us. The results from Gutter Pro, mainly across the network for most partners for October, November and December, were well ahead of expectation. Some great results. I think the highest single van for November was just under the 10,000 level, so an amazing performance. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about strategy versus tactics. Now, when I got involved with Gutter Pro, which is about 4 years ago, it was always with the intention that we'd bring more brands into the family, if you like. Gutter Pro has expanded and developed beyond our expectations. We think now we're starting to consolidate the national brand, the first mover advantage. We think we are the number one in the UK for what we do, but that certainly isn't any reason to sort of rest on the laurels. It's about pushing forward into 2020 and beyond and offering a range of franchise solutions. That's our name, innovative franchise solutions, to you, our partners. So strategy and tactic, these words are always shown with a chessboard graphic, so why change the pattern? I always think of tactics being the small things, strategy being the big idea, or strategy being where do you want to go. Tactics are the things which are actually going to get you there. And not enough businesses spend time thinking about the strategy. Everybody's self-absorbed in the day-to-day, the complications of doing the job, promoting the business, and really everything else that life throws at you. So there's sometimes little focus to sit back and think, where do I want the business to be in not next month or not by May of this year, but where would I like my operation, my business to be in 5 or 6 years' time? Of course, there's a lot of hard work to take it wherever it is you want to go. But sometimes by thinking about where you want to go, as the saying goes, you might actually end up getting there. So a perfectly good strategy could be to stay with a single Gutter Pro territory or a territory plus, operate the business 7 days a week. I guess for most people, that involves hiring in somebody to do some of the work, whether that's Friday, Saturday, Sunday or whatever, and maxing out the single vehicle just below the £85,000 a year VAT limit. And that's a perfectly reasonable strategy to focus on the profit and keep the turnover where at that sort of level. And from our perspective, from Innovative Franchise Solutions, that is absolutely fine. We want to support your business in doing that, help you optimize the marketing to make to maximize the profit from that operation. We want to also provide the scope to grow your business further if that's what you want to do, taking on more territories, more areas, more postcodes, adding more brands, which we started to introduce to you in the Pro Plus magazine. And we think the scope, the potential, is to grow a business that's turning over maybe £250,000 across a number of areas. When somebody says to you, what is it that you do, rather than being a Eco-Dry or a Gutter Pro, it's, I operate a business across multi-brands, servicing a portfolio of customers, generating the cross-fertilization from each of those customer bases. So that's equally a good strategy, or anything in between. Whatever it is you want to do, We want to add value to your business by testing and challenging, kicking the tires with you, looking at the options, working out the cash flow, working out the business model, helping you to secure the finance if that's what you need to do what you want to do, and really to maximize the opportunity that you have with innovative franchise solutions. So tactics, they are absolutely essential, and this is the spider diagram that we introduced in the Pro Plus magazine. Ian from Solihull, mapping out what he does from a marketing perspective, so you can identify other opportunities. So of course you need the tactics, but it's also thinking about the big picture and the strategy. So there's a number of areas on you can think of it like the Trivial Pursuit wheel, and I think there is more cheeses on this than an actual Trivial Pursuit before somebody bothers Andy with that question. Is adding EcoDry an option, or home agency in September this year? What the hell is the licensed agent, and what is the reasons why you'd consider using that? And Andy and myself are with the managing partner of our accountants for Innovative Franchise Solutions today, looking at licensed agents, looking at how that fitted in and the reasons why we'd introduced that. Whatever it is you do, you may need some finance to grow the business. So I want to just refresh everybody about the best funding option that has ever existed in the UK, which is Startup Loans and the British Business Bank. Mind the gap, again today with the managing partner of this accountancy firm. He said that some of his clients were struggling with the question of did they go over the VAT limit, knowing that there was a level of turnover from up to about £95,000, where actually it would be better off if they stayed in bed rather than generate that business. So minding the gap, leverage, whatever that is. Adding new territories and territory pluses are reasonably self-explanatory, or should you be adding more brands? And then the question is, and these things tend to be a little bit like a jigsaw puzzle, which pieces do you put down first? How do you link them together? How do you make it more efficient? And how do you make all of these different elements or facets fit together and work together to grow your business? So forgive me for using the Ansoff matrix. Now, some people in our Gutter Pro network have got business degrees. Some people have worked in marketing practice. Some people have had these matrices shoved down their throat in various training courses in the past. But it does actually make sense. Market penetration is kind of, sorry about that, market penetration meaning kind of what you do today. The scope then to sell more product to your existing customers, or the opportunity to look for more customers, more areas, more postcodes. And they're generally considered to be safer expansion options than diversification and doing something that's completely different. So mind the gap. And it's the VAT gap that comes into play at £85,000 a year. And if you have an employee, it actually means that between £85,000 and £110,000, you're better off staying in bed. You're in the dead zone, so to speak, where suddenly you're having to pay VAT. Now, there is a 10% VAT that you can pay. It's called a flat rate scheme, and I'm going to talk more about that at the conference. But it is this dead zone, and I think in the strategy, the key thing is don't end up with your business stuck in the dead zone. If you're going to go above 110k, then put the elements in place, the other brands, taking on more territory, increasing your marketing, so that you can push the business quickly through the dead zone and actually start to make a return on your efforts and the growing size of your business. Now, it can come down a little bit with the licensed agent. Now, I'm going to go through this on Excel spreadsheets and show you how this works on the evening before session. And there's some method in the madness about the licensed agent, even though it looks crazy at first glance. So the other option is simply to say there's the VAT gap there, so I'm going to stick below the 85,000 and optimize the profit that I can make from the business I operate, and that is absolutely fine. So if you're driving above more brands and do it quickly, I think is at the center of the advice, but we look at this more the evening before. So back onto the matrix. So, that's what you operate today. There's a number of you with multi vans in Liverpool and Leicester. And, a logical thing is to take on more postcodes. It's a business that you now know and operate effectively. And that all makes sort of strategic sense. And the Territory Plus is aimed to be a way in which, not in every situation unfortunately, but where we have a half territory available, or we can create a half territory that partners can take on that extra area, just to make certain that they can grow that business based just on GutterPro a little bit further. EcoDry, the carpet brand, which I'm going to come on to in more detail later on, is the other option. How can you sell more products, more services, similar services to effectively the existing GutterPro customers that you have in your territory? Or, of course, the vision might be to take on more territory and more brands. It's a bigger play, but we believe that the potential is to grow a business up to about £250,000 a year. And the logic of doing something that you already understand, something that you have been doing for a number of months or years, is pretty straightforward. The logic of using your existing customer base in the territory to sell more, it's all called leverage in business books. How can you make a small, how can you do something for a small amount and actually create a large amount in return? I apologise for the dollars on the slide. So what does it cost to acquire a GutterPro customer? Well, actually it's been falling over the past few months, we believe, but £25 isn't a bad budget figure. So if you have 500 customers, well, you can do the maths, or I've done that for you. It's maybe £12,500 of hidden value, hidden marketing value that you've actually got contained in your customer base. And that's one of the strengths of GutterPro, is we can acquire customers quite quickly. I remember 4.5 years ago talking to Andy before I was ever formally involved, and I said, how would we generate customers? And he explained the method, did a quick calculation, and I thought it was too good to be true compared to other businesses selling household services. So how can we actually make more use, because not enough of our customers reorder every year, or even every other year, or even every third year. So how can we stretch the value of the customer base that you have in your GutterPro business? So what attracted us to EcoDry was what we believe is a very high level of overlap of the customer base. We think it's actually higher going from GutterPro to EcoDry. With a carpet business, there's going to be, obviously people who live in tall flats would have their carpets cleaned, but wouldn't use our GutterPro services. So we think it's a very high overlap in terms of the customers who might use both services. So that's the whole idea of leverage. How can you use that 12,500 if you have 500 customers? How can you unlock that hidden value that effectively you're just sitting on to start a new business, to generate more income, more turnover, and more profit? How could that customer base be used to send a brochure introducing the new EcoDry business with the people, from the people who brought you GutterPro, posting it out to the customer base? How many of those would go on to book? Now, that's a really important question. How many of those people, if a beautiful brochure providing the connection was mailed to the customer base, how many of those would actually go on to book? And we're going to find that out during February and March with some testing that we'll do and come back later in the year. So this is Andy Knowles, and I know Andy Knowles for about 15 years, and our paths crossed in the graphic arts industry. And when I was the chief executive of Graphenia PLC, and in my last month before I elected to leave that company, I was trying to buy Andy's last business, which was a online printing company. And in the end, after I left, he didn't sell it to Graphenia. He sold it to a division of Vistaprint, who some of you may have come across. It's quite a big company. It's a NASDAQ listed. NASDAQ is the Jew family, and didn't want to be away in hotels and started to, he bought the EcoDry business and started Business Guy. And we hope to complete the formalities of Andy joining Innovative Franchise Solutions during January 2020. We've agreed a deal. We just need to go through the detail now of putting that to bed. And once we've done that, we will lose no time in moving forward and starting to test the leverage, start to test how we can use the type of GutterPro customer to generate the carpet cleaning bookings. Now, give you some parameters. Now, we'll go into this in more plus VAT, and we anticipate the EcoDry business being about 24,850. So absolutely, it is more expensive than GutterPro. There is a lot more equipment. I wanted to give you a certain flavour of some of the other parameters, some of the other financial elements, which are a little bit different. So we think that the marketing launch budget, which for GutterPro is £1,800 plus the franchise direct marketing that you carry out yourself. But for the EcoDry business, we believe we have to put about £6,000 into the initial promotion, and not just over the first quarter, but over the second, third, and fourth quarter as the business develops. Why is that the case? Why can we launch a GutterPro with £1,800 plus your own marketing? And it's just the maturity of the market in terms of reaching out. The job value, almost double for the cleaning. We recently had carpets cleaned and some hard floors cleaned, and it came to about £220 for the house. So it's a higher job value. And I think this is one of the most telling points. So we think that a GutterPro 5-year client value. Now, if a job is worth £120, then we think a little bit more than half the customers will repeat over 5 years. It may be higher than that, but we haven't got 5 years worth of data to crunch yet, and we're cautious people. But from what we understand from Andy's business, and of course there is too many Andys, from Andy Carpet, as he will now be known, which does mean that Andy Smith has been renamed Andy Gutter. From what Andy Carpet tells us, that it's pointing towards the 5-year value of the customer being over £600. Now, once upon a time, 2 years ago, we discussed a half price every year club for Gutter Pro. There wasn't a lot of enthusiasm for that, so we pushed ahead with other initiatives instead. But our understanding of the carpet, and by carpet I also mean the upholstery, leather, hard surfaces cleaning market, is that the repeatability by which customers will have you back, with many signing up for a once a year spruce up, if you like, is a lot higher than we have in Gutter Pro. So we aim to have a second Gutter Pro van, which will be operated by ourselves directly, on the road for February this year. So our aim is to push ahead as quickly as we possibly can, trying to understand so that we can come back March and April with a lot more information about what we found out. I keep going back to this word, the leverage. What's the upside? How can we turn a customer base from Gutter Pro into jobs for the Eco-Dry formula? So we think the scope could exist that early adopters might be able to come on board April this year, if not April, May, and if not May, June. But it's kind of that second quarter of 2020. We're keen that some of our Gutter Pro partners have pushed ahead with this as well. Once, and I massively stress this, we found out a little bit more data about the leverage. So 24,000 is what we believe the arm's length price will be, and we will put some significant, and I mean significant investment incentives in for the early adopters who come on board. I will talk a little bit more of what we have in mind on the evening before session, before the conference. We're also very pleased Andy's actually coming to that evening before session. He'll bring his van, and also just a chance to sort of sit around in an informal setting for Andy to make a presentation about his business and his journey, and what a month looks like in terms of the how long the jobs take, what are the complications, what's the marketing that's driving this, and get a sense and put questions in about whether that's a business that you want to be involved with. Andy,
I've got 3 questions, Tony.
Okay.
The first one is, can I use my database of customers for my wife's business?
Okay, this is always, and when I meet owners of other franchise networks, when I'm involved with the British Franchise Association, this is a question that we encounter quite a lot, and as far as I know, without exception, any franchisor wants to lock value into their brand, with good reason behind that, for both franchisee and franchisor. So if I just explain that a little bit more, if we allow a customer base to be used for another business that wasn't part of IFS, which hasn't been regulated and controlled, then the one absolute certainty is that when our franchise partners came to sell the business, then the value of that business would be significantly and massively less. It's also quite likely that a neighbouring franchisee may lose value because somebody then could take the customers on and set up in competition. So something that franchisors do centrally is they massively seek to protect the customer base which is being used within the network, and our position wouldn't really be any different from that. So my word is usually, I'm significantly reluctant even to look into those situations, and for the avoidance of doubt, the customer base absolutely mustn't be used for for anything else. Anyone buying your business, and in my experience, if they're paying more than maybe £20,000, and I think we've got many franchise partners across the network now with increasingly valuable businesses. There's a lawyer involved from the other side, and there's a whole page of nasty things called warranties and indemnities, and these are the things which lawyers on the other side chip away at value. So I don't think we could agree to that.
So the other question that we've had is, why is EcoDry so much more expensive?
Okay, so it's going back to a So first of all, there's a significantly larger marketing kitty for promoting the business. The equipment itself, there is, Andy will talk about this in more detail the evening before. Dry carpet cleaning is the big buzzword, but the reality is that dry carpet cleaning isn't suitable for every situation, and you need the wet carpet cleaning. To maximise it as well, you need the hard floor equipment. You need the various pieces of kit that you use for the soft furnishings. So there's simply more in it, and the marketing cost, regrettably, is that much higher. But I stress the point that there'll be incentives, and I mean significant incentives for early adopters, because you yourself in your area have a customer base that you can leverage. So yeah.
And finally, the question so far, how much can you earn from one van?
Okay, so if you multiply those numbers up, because the other part of that question is how long does each job take, then we think it's more than a Gutter Pro business. 7 days a week of operation, subcontracting or using an employee, we think a Gutter Pro can get just below the VAT level. If you fill an EcoDry van by itself, you'll be above the VAT level. So I want Andy to spend, and I do mean Carpet Andy, to talk a little bit more about that. And the idea of having this session the week before is just to give you a flavour of some of the points that we're going to deal with that day before, but in smaller groups, face to face, which is always easier with some spreadsheets, being able to look at the numbers in that little bit more detail.
I've got another question here. Why is there a bigger marketing cost if we are levering the existing client base?
Okay. Really good question. And I come back to just go back on the idea of having and I mean a really big incentive for early adopters reflects the fact that we wouldn't have to spend, if our sense is true, and we need to test this, and we will test it during February, and there is a leverage, as we believe, between the Gutter Pro customer base and the EcoDry potential, then that marketing can be significantly reduced, and we will put some real and material incentives on the table for the early adopters.
And another question, how much does the kit cost?
Okay. Well, I think the question that sits before that one is what actually is the kit, rather than me plucking a number out of the air and that someone's for that to be sensed as either high or low. And at the evening before session, we'll have the van, come and have a look, see what the equipment is, and we'll give you a sense of all the parameters in the same, I believe, honest way that we try to do that with the Gutter Pro business when you came on board.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So, in growing a business, I think Neil hit the high numbers last month at over £9,000, and my word, he put in a shift along with a few other people who are sort of 8,000, 7,000. But if you're going to grow a business into multi-brands and multi-vehicles, the facts of the matter is you're going to need some people to carry out some of the work. Should they be employees? Could they be self-employed, or this idea called licensed agents? And I want to just touch on a little bit of detail here, but I've cut it back and we look at it in greater depth on the evening before. So Charlie Mullins owns a business called Plimlico Plumbers, and they are notoriously expensive London plumbers. He's in the rich list. I think he has a supposed worth of £100 million. And he got the shock of his life last year when one of his plumbers, now his plumbers are actually all operating via a limited company. And again, I was talking with Neil Phillips, who's our accountant today, about this in some detail. So the plumber in question, who took him to the Supreme Court, claiming he had worker rights. And we all read about the gig economy, we read about Deliveroo, we read about Uber drivers, and are they entitled to holidays? Are they entitled to sick pay, paternity leave, maternity leave, and the like? And Charlie Mullins firmly believed, and his two QC barristers firmly believed, that there was no case to answer, and this self-employed plumber, who was a limited company and VAT registered, had no claim for holiday pay. And unfortunately for Mr. Mullins, the Supreme Court found differently, and that opened up a whole can of worms. So this is what we try and you can't simply decide that somebody is self-employed. There's a number of tests. In this case, where with Plimlico Plumbers, it was the person himself using the employment courts, it's European law, but that will be all rolled across in February under the Great Repeal Act. So it will still exist. It will still be upheld by the UK courts. And he asserted employment rights. Equally, HMRC can come along and say, actually, you should have been taking national insurance off these people. You should have been taking tax at source. So I'm going to look at this I've cut back on these slides a lot, just with what we wanted to cover, but I'll go through this in a little bit more detail at the conference. But I've shared this with a few partners and produced the documentation for this now. A licensed agent. So how could we better navigate all of these problems that Plimlico Plumbers faced? So it's an alternative to actually employing people. So the bit that we do differently from Plimlico Plumbers is that the licensed agent, who's somebody who you meet, somebody who gets in touch with you, somebody who will wear the uniform, drive a van that they probably rent from you, and use equipment that they probably rent from you, but they'll actually need their own login to ServiceMate, and they'll need their own login to Stripe, and they will actually charge the customer direct. You will subcontract the job to them, and the customer will pay them direct, and then they will remit, they will pay on some of that. Now, this sounds crazy. Why would I want the customer to pay this licensed agent? Well, what happens if they run off and don't pay me? But this is so important to maintaining the position of that person being self-employed, because they're doing the job for multiple customers, and that is one of the most important tests that the courts and HMRC go on to apply. So you have the jobs, you then assign or subcontract these jobs to the licensed agent, and then they pay to you a fee, which we think is about half the value of the job. But the way I've structured the agreements, which I'll go through with you the night before, the way I've structured the agreement, you can set that commercially in your own range. So there's a side letter between ourselves and you, the franchise partner, that gives you the permissions for this, and there is then a contract that you have with your licensed agent. So just for the avoidance of doubt, so that nobody gets the wrong end of the stick, this is not in any way about cutting you out of the Gutter Pro business. It's actually about trying to enhance the opportunity that is there to you. Licensed agents in your territory will only exist if you put them in place. And it's one option that I have sat down with a number of people. I met with two partners one evening before Christmas looking at the option for this, and they are actually thinking, would they be able to share a licensed agent? And this was a very, very good question. I had to think long and hard about that, and I can't see any problem with that at all. So this provides one more way to be able to scale and enhance the business. And then they rent for a fee, and I'll go through, and I have some spreadsheets, but trying to present Excel over a webinar is hardly the best thing to do. So we'll go through this the evening before.
Okay, I've got a question. How does being an agent differ from a 0 hours contract?
So let me ask another rhetorical question there, which might be, can we give any watertight, cast iron, 100% assurances that no court or tribunal would consider a licensed agent to be a worker? Then the answer is we can't, because what we found out with Charlie Mullins, who had two of the highest costing QCs, Queen's Counsellors in the country representing him, and they got it wrong, and we can't get any form of assurances from a lawyer on this point. But where it massively differs is that the customer is actually paying the licensed agent. And sitting down with Neil Phillips today, looking at this, and we were talking about it from a VAT perspective as well, and that's the major difference, that in the case of Deliveroo, the customer isn't actually paying the person who delivers. The licensed agent is invoicing in their name for that job. They're taking risk in the transaction, because they're being paid 50% or whatever the percentage is. And I think this is doing all the things that we possibly could do to find I don't say clever as in a smart ass, but clever as in a well-grounded way forward. But I'm happy, it's a very good point, And I think, picking up on this the evening before in a little bit more detail, but this is it's that slide. It's not just important, it's not just very important, it's exceptionally very important that the licensed agent is actually charging the customer with their own name on the invoice and then paying that back to you.
Okay, I've got another question. Do you think that there will be any legal fees involved in signing the contract between the Gutter Pro partner and the licensed agent? So any legal fees?
Okay, I guess I would need to know a little bit more about what you actually mean, like legal fees. Would you be paying their solicitor's costs? I doubt it. They may not have a solicitor. So looking at whatever costs, and let me change the question slightly, is would there be any costs from the Gutter Pro partner to Innovative Franchise Solution for each one? And there will be, because we want to run some DBS checks on the licensed agents. So you will appoint them, but we want to validate the appointment so that we can preserve the goodwill that we believe exists in the network. But it's something, again, these are big ideas, there's lots to cover, that we should deal with in a little bit more detail in the evening before session.
One more question. Mm-hmm. Why would a licensed agent pay rental fees for equipment in a van, not knowing how much work they will receive? Okay,
so I guess the answer to that's a really good question. Is the licensed agent would only pay the rental fees and the equipment if you were giving them jobs for that particular week. One of the important tests for self-employment is, does the person have to do any work for you? Can they decline to do the work? Must you offer them the work? So the choreography of this is that each week they will declare to you what slots they have available, and you will then offer them jobs or no jobs for all, some or none of those slots. And of course they're not going to pay you a rental fee for the equipment and for the vehicle if you're not giving them any jobs. But the key thing is that you're not obligated to do any of those. But really good point, and exactly the sort of detail that we want to pick up on the evening before. Right, where were we? Van and kit rental. So, and again, we'll look at a spreadsheet before the conference where we'll see how it really can maximise the value if you're wanting to park your business under the VAT limit, because effectively the licensed agent is paying themselves their salary before, which isn't then being counted towards your VAT turnover. So we look at that in a bit more detail. So I know I've shown quite a few of you home agency. I'm just going to go through some of the basics and not all of the slides. So home agency at its simplest level can be thought of as a cleaning business. We found a partner somewhere in the UK, a very capable lady who has built up a cleaning business, of whom we're intending to roll this out from about April as a test with them, starting to develop this software, seeing how it works. But we've been meeting with her quite a lot on and off for the past 4 or 5 months. And what we hear is increasingly, and whether this is because of Brexit, increasingly the challenge is actually finding the cleaners, not the customers. There's actually a shortage, supply side, of capable and willing workers, rather than a shortage or a problem in actually being able to find the customers. So there's something like 29 cleaning franchises in the UK. So a good question is, why do we need any more? And my answer is because we don't believe any of them use tech in quite the right way. And the vision is on this iPad, it's all driven by traffic lights. It's all about the interaction of the franchisee, of whom there's no belief that they will ever carry out the jobs themselves, the customers and the people who provide the services, very carefully not calling them workers, because that might put them under the scope of employment courts. So it's about joining those up through an iPad, an iPhone, or even in this case, it will be an Android app. So the regular service providers, cleaners, and actually gardeners as well. I found a chap who will come on board who runs a gardening business. His background isn't as a gardener. He's actually an ex-policeman. But he saw a gap in the market. He believes that there's many self-employed gardeners who bring their own equipment, who are absolutely lousy at marketing their own businesses. And he basically has the customer base, and he puts the gardeners in. But in its most simple way of thinking, it's a cleaning business. And then concierge support, home support, is increasingly something that older people need. It might be a help with the shopping, and people who are able to do that, or window cleaners. Again, there's no sense within the business model that the franchisee, these people who are looking down from above, making sure that the whole business operates, that they would either be doing the cleaning, would be buying lawnmowers and other gardening accessories, or would be buying the equipment to do the window cleaning themselves. We can just join up the dots between those who can and the customers who want them. And then there's occasional service providers, of course including gutters, of course including carpets and ovens. And are there old people out there? I think my dad is one. Once upon a time he would have done his DIY himself. He can't do it anymore, and unfortunately he has a useless son who really isn't any good at that type of thing. So wanting 3 hours of a home repairs person who will fix a door, a wonky shelf, a dripping tap, and do the likes, because the older generation, the 70 plus, have better pensions than many people in the younger age groups, and a reasonably affluent generation. So many franchise cleaning businesses operate like this. The customer pays the cleaner directly, and then they pay a fee between £3 and £5 an hour to the franchise owner for arranging the customer. We've got some rental properties in Chester, and my wife Andrea, she pays a franchise cleaning business exactly like that, so that they will find the cleaner to come in once every other week or whatever it is. So there's nothing new in that structure. And then we believe that the occasional service providers will provide commission back to the home agency franchise. And I'll go into more detail the evening before as to why we think it's that way around. So it's all about how, because it's the bane of Andrea's life. It really annoys her that she has to arrange these two separate payments for the cleaners and the franchisee. Why couldn't it be one payment? And I actually think that we can do that, and we can find a way in an app that we can take the one payment off the customer, and we can then divvy that up and distribute it as it needs to go, and a consolidated bill for the customer for what they've paid and what that is attributable for, and really to make sure who gets the right amount of money. And each one of those lines, that highlighted area of Katrina Brooks with her 8 hours of cleaning for £72, that's a legally compliant invoice, and we're using a method called self invoicing there. And it might be the case that the money is actually collected by a Dutch or a Irish company just to navigate the regulatory framework that we work within, and that those funds will be distributed seamlessly in a very quick way, which I think is the way to hold on to good workers, good cleaners, good gardeners, etc. So below the surface, this incredibly complicated set of legal agreements sloshing around. And like any good app, it's about making sense of those. When did you last read and consider section 13.1.4.9 of your iTunes terms and conditions? You don't. You simply tick the boxes. So it's about trying to have the necessary legal structures there, able to be reviewed, able to be efficiently confirmed, so that we can preserve the independent worker status. I said it. It's a forfeit. The independent service provider status of all those people on the right-hand side of the screen. So the vision being, it's all driven by traffic lights. Let's say there's a booking and they've turned up on time, then wherever in the world the franchisee, they can see for that particular gig, because each one of these is a small gig in its own right, that the job is taking place as it should be. If they're late, they can see that maybe something's gone wrong, and if it's the person simply hasn't turned up, they can see there's a default. They may need to get in touch with the cleaner. They most certainly need to get in touch with the customer and get involved. For relieving feedback, again, talking to the lady that we're going to pioneer this with, what grinds the gears of the cleaners is being sent at 11 o'clock a photo by one of their customers during the day, showing that they didn't do X, Y, or Z. And apparently after the Prosecco hour, the number of complaints and the aggression of those complaints sort of starts to rise. So it's about how do we manage those processes? How do we define what's going to take place within the app? And how do we manage, control the results from that? And when you look at these situations, and this is built based on what we've seen from this lady that we've been working with, it's a complete spider's web of different people carrying out different independent contracts at different hours of the day. And the vision is how to turn that into a streamlined overview of what jobs have happened, what jobs are still to happen, which jobs was there an exception on, so that the time of the franchisee to resolve what needs to be resolved, but see the wood for the trees. And I'll show you a little bit more of this vision during the evening before. So it's a little bit later in the year, but nevertheless we're aiming for a 2020 launch for home agency. There's a lot of tech that we need to do before then, but it's something that we are pretty optimistic about the potential, and it dovetails, it links together, it's part of the jigsaw that naturally fits in with those franchise partners who want to take on multi-brands, and it also in a way fits in with franchise partners who don't want to take multi-brands, because collectively across Innovative Franchise Solutions we're just simply trying to grow a larger combined customer base. So finance is an important part of how you get there. There's never been a better time in the UK for funding businesses, with the Startup Loan Scheme and the British Business Bank, who actually provide the funds. I was sat at a Franchise X dinner with the Lloyds Bank head of franchising, I think it was 6 months ago, and his best quote was 9 to 11% for a business loan. If you have a perfect credit rating, you simply say the loan is for a kitchen and you might get 3 or 4. But 6% flat rate over 5 years, £25,000 pounds per person, less the balance that you have outstanding. So if you took out a loan for 10,000 2.5 years ago for your Gutter Pro, then without doing the compound interest calculation in my head, it's probably about 2,700 that you just over half that amount that you still owe. So you can top that up, and a couple can borrow 25,000 each, and I put two guys in just because we are in that liberal world, or it could be two business partners who are coming together, pooling their resources, and choosing to run their business together. They could raise £50,000. So there's a requirement, just in case you go off and look at the Startup Loans website. If you do, please don't apply for it, because I can send you a link, which means that I can actually navigate the loan application through the Startup Loan Scheme for you and put it into people who understand Gutter Pro and actually trust that what we do is not a whole pile of baloney. So there's a requirement that you can't use it if your business is over 2 years old, but there's absolutely nothing, because I spoke to them today about this, that if you operate a Gutter Pro in one area, that you couldn't take on the neighbouring area and see that as a new business. Or if you're adding home agency or eco-dry, then that would certainly be seen as a new business. And this is the window of funding that exists. After every budget, I always read the headlines just to make sure that they haven't stopped the Startup Loan Scheme, because it would make the journey for our franchise partners that little bit more complicated if it did. So it's a very, very useful scheme. So to sort of summarise, this is the Trivial Pursuit wheel of strategic options, which is open to our franchise partners, and this is what we'll look at in a little bit more detail round the table the evening before, putting some numbers onto the possible scenarios, having some spreadsheets out, trying to use it as a productive strategic business planning session, and trying to add value to what it is that you do. So we will see you all the evening before. Look forward to some interesting times, and actually welcoming and introducing Andy Carpet to you all. Andy, is there any other things coming on there?
We do have a couple of questions if you've got
Fantastic.
Got time. So what's to stop a licensed operator becoming a competitor once they learn to do the job?
Okay, so let's add into that question, what's to stop an employee becoming a competitor once they, someone could be an employee for you, they could do the job, they could learn the ropes, and then they can simply up and off. Well, ultimately, the best way to avoid any risk in business is simply not to go off and do business, is simply to sort of stay in bed at the end of the day. But legally, if you want to know what the legal position is, basically employment contracts are, you can drive a bus through them. The employment courts are massively weighted towards the employee, and restrictions are far. So if you employed someone as a gutter operator in your business, then I don't think you could restrict them from operating a Gutter Pro business in your town for more than a month or 3 at the most. Because this person's self-employed, I think you've got a little bit more scope. So it's not perfect, there's risk, but I think I'd rather be using restrictive covenants in a self-employed environment rather than using them in an employed environment. It's a really technical legal question. I'm happy to go into it more, but everything is weighted towards the employee. A little bit more is weighted towards our favour with a licensed agent.
And a couple of questions on EcoDry. Who's testing it, and what will the monthly fee be?
Okay, so we will share a little bit more of what we believe the fee structure will be maybe next week, or it may be in April when we've worked a little bit more of the operation ourselves. As I say, Andy's coming down, Andy Carpet is coming down for the evening before. We've still got to complete our formalities. We've got the deal agreed, it's in heads of terms, it's signed at heads of terms. We've just got to put that in place. So I'd rather try and present to you the complete position when we know it, rather than giving you dribs and drabs of that. It has to be something that works for our franchise partners. We never forget that.
Fantastic. That's it.
Okay, well look, so that's just on the hour, which is what we were aiming for. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. I wish you success in your business, health and happiness for 2020, and look forward to seeing as many of you as possible next Friday, and as many of you as possible next Thursday for the evening before session. So have a good evening.
Thank you.